Are you ready for another episode of Smalls That Sell, a series dedicated to breaking down what's hot and trending in the big box stores in a way that you can build these items yourself at home, put your own twist to it, and put a little money into your pocket? I have several new build ideas for this week's video, so let's go ahead and hop into it. So this first one fits perfectly into this season that we're in now, which is kind of like the spring/summer season. The cool thing about this one is that it's not only just fitting for this season, but it could be easily turned into an evergreen product. Anytime that we can come up with a product like that for making money with woodworking, that's gold. So there's a few things that caught my eye about this one. First, it was on the trending list. Next, it was just a cool build. And then what really topped it off was the price. And that is this $150 mini wheelbarrow. Okay, so if it's on the trending list and it has the super high price, that means that people are actually paying for this. And I have to admit, this thing's pretty cool. But before you roll this build out in your head because there's angles and it looks like it's a big build, this thing's actually really easy to make, and it's not near as big as what it looks. So this wheelbarrow is actually 38 inches long, and that's going to be from the end of the handles to the tip of the tire that's in the front. Then it's only about 14 inches wide, and you can kind of see that by the little bouquet of flowers that they have sitting in there, and it's 16 inches tall. So before we get into the wheel and the handle, which is actually one of the easiest parts about this entire thing, let's go ahead and break down the barrel itself, or I'm going to call it the box. So to build this box, you can either glue up material to make 1x12 material, or you can just buy 1x12, which is 11¼ inches wide. And we'll be using that for the depth of this box. So we're going to start off by cutting our two side pieces, and that's where the angles are going to come in. So based on all the other dimensions, the length for these sides look to be right around 2 foot. So just cut two boards that are 24 inches long from your 1x12 material. And then we're just going to add this angle into the end. So it looks to be around 5 to 8 degrees, somewhere in there. And this doesn't have to be exact, just as long as both sides match. So this board I've cut to 8 degrees. And most of these pictures, the wheelbarrow is kind of leaning forward. So this is about what it looks like. So we'll go ahead and put an 8-degree cut on one end of each of our boards. And then we're left with this sharp point here. And if you notice what they've done with this point, they've removed this tip to the thickness of their end boards, which in this case would be 3/4 inch. Just going to get rid of this sharp point and also allow our end boards to match up better. So once you have your two sides cut, let's go ahead and cut our end boards. For these, we'll be needing two boards that are 12½ inches long. Combined with our two sideboards, that's going to give us our 14-inch width. Then with your two sideboards cut, you're simply going to sandwich those boards into your sideboards and attach those directly onto the ends, drilling and screwing through your sideboards. Since this is going to be outside, I'd also make sure to use some exterior wood glue for all of these parts. So now you have the frame of your box made up, and the only thing left to do is to add in the bottom. And honestly, the best way to come up with the dimensions for the bottom, because your angle may be a little bit different than mine, is to simply cut some bottom boards to fit your box. So let's say that you just wanted a plywood bottom. You just set your box right on top, trace it from the inside, and then just simply drop this in from the top. The angles will actually hold this into place. Then you can install a few screws from the outside. Or if you wanted to put some slats in the bottom of this, which is probably what I would do, I'd actually cut one end of each slat to match the 8-degree angle that you put on your sideboards. So you would attach the square end to the back, and then your 8-degree angle should fall right into place on the inside. However you want to do it, it's completely up to you and what makes this a super cool project. So if you wanted to use plywood, if you wanted to use strips, or if you wanted to use even chicken wire, you could come up with a ton of different uses for this thing. So now that we have the barrel or the main part of this thing put together, let's go ahead and set that aside and assemble the bottom of this thing. Okay, so for the handles themselves, you can either use a wooden closet rod or some 1-inch dowel. Regardless of what you decide to use, you're going to need an 8-foot stick or two 4-foot sticks for this. So for the main handles of this thing, you're going to need two of those that are cut down to 38 inches long. And once you have your two handles cut, just lay those out side by side, measure down about 1 inch from one end and make a mark on both of your handles. Then from that point, you'll want to drill a hole through both of these that will match the bolt that you need for your tire. So that bolt hole size will ultimately depend on what type of tire that you use. So speaking of these tires, that's actually going to be the most expensive part of this whole thing. Based on the rest of the dimensions, I'm assuming these tires are around 12 inches tall and only about 1.75 inches wide. So I looked on Amazon for similar types of tires, and the cheapest ones that I could find were right around 10 to 12 bucks each. But what I did notice is that's the exact same dimension used for push mowers. So let's get creative here. If you know of anybody that has an old push mower that's kind of sitting off in the weeds somewhere, or if you don't like your neighbor and you want to borrow their push mower tires, there you go, even cheaper. So once you have the inner diameter of the bearing that's on your wheel, you'll just get a bolt with a couple of washers and a lock nut to match that, and go ahead and attach your wheel to your handles. Once you have that, let's go ahead and attach our box. So with the angle of the front of the box kind of right behind the wheel, maybe 6 inches, 8 inches or so. Honestly, it's up to you and whatever looks best. Go ahead and loosen your bolt up so that you can spread these handles out. Set your box on and line your handles up so that they're about 2 inches from each side. And then from the bottom of your box, pre-drill and install some screws into your handle. Once you have that installed, go ahead and tighten your nut back up. And then the last thing that we're going to do is install these 2 back supports. So for the 2 back supports, we're going to be using the same dowel or closet rod that you use for the handles. And the length of these, I'm going to leave that up to you. So just kind of play around with this thing and figure out what height looks the best. Once you determine that height, just measure down from your handle right behind your box, and that's going to give you the length that you need these supports to be. Go ahead and use your leftover material from your handles, cut those 2 supports to the length that you just determined, and then we're going to install those to the bottom of our box. And to do that, you're just going to kind of put these into place at the back of the box until it looks right. And then from underneath, go ahead and trace this out, pre-drill a small hole through that, flip it back over, put everything back into place, and then pre-drill into your supports using the hole that you just made, and throw in some exterior screws. Just like anything else, if you want to make multiples of these, after you've made your first one, you can pump these things out like crazy. Now this item is going to be one of those that's really going to rely on you for staging. So as you can see with theirs, they just have natural wood. I'd actually mock this up with some different styles. So maybe do some whitewashing with the wood, or you could do it natural like they did and actually let the customer paint this to match their house or their decor. However you decide to do it, I would stage it up different ways. For the summer and springtime, do exactly what they did. Put some fresh cut flowers in this thing. Once you get a little closer to fall, maybe switch over to some sunflowers or pumpkins. And then once you get into the winter months, you can put some small Christmas trees laying down in this thing, or really anything that you could dream up. Again, this is one of those evergreen items that you won't have any issue selling year round. Okay, so this next one I actually really like. One thing, it is super simple and cheap to make. And the next reason is that it could easily find a place into anyone's house. And that's going to be this bedside floating bookrest. Okay, so this is a really neat concept because you can use this for several different things. A lot of people enjoy reading right before bed, and this is designed to save your page in your book. But the cool thing about this is that it can be used for multiple different things. So if you notice in their staging, of course they have the books, but they also have the little cubby at the top with just different everyday items that people may take out of their pockets before they go to bed. You could put watches in this, wallets, cell phones. There's even a place for pens and pencils at the front in case someone likes to do crossword puzzles or whatever. Regardless, this is a super cool build, and the bonus is that it's a functional one. And anytime that someone is trying to decide whether to purchase something, it makes it a lot easier for them to make that decision if it actually serves a purpose and has a function rather than just a decoration. So now that we know that this needs to be on our build list, let's go ahead and break it down. So almost everything on this build is using 7.5 inch dimensions. If you wanted to buy a 1x8, which will most likely be 7.25, it's completely fine and it'll still work out great. But just for explaining this, I'm just going to use 7.5 inches. So starting off with our 3/4 by 7.5 inch material, we'll go ahead and cut our longest piece, and that's going to be our backboard. So one of the first things that you probably noticed was all these different angles. The good thing about it is that all of these angles are simple 45s. So to cut your top 45 for your backboard, we'll say that this is going to be it. We'll just find center, make a mark, and cut a 45 degrees this way, 45 degrees this way. The total length of your board will only need to be about 12 inches, and now you have your backboard cut. Now for these 2 top boards, each end is going to be cut at 45 degrees as well, but we want this to kind of hang over the edge a little bit, kind of like a birdhouse. So using your 7.5 inch material, let's go ahead and cut these 2 boards at 8 inches long with a 45 degree angle on each end. Now you'll just take the top of your backboard, put some wood glue in the 2 cuts that you've made, then attach both of your top boards or roof boards directly to your backboard using some brad nails or some screws. Since our 2 top boards are sitting on top of the backboard, we'll rip off 3/4 of an inch from our shelf board just to keep it from sticking out. And to make sure that that shelf board is kind of inset up a little bit, let's go ahead and cut that at 7.5 inches long. So you'll end up with a shelf board that's 7.5 inches long, 6 3/4 of an inch wide, and then you'll simply cut a 45 degree angle on each end. Once you have that, you can just add some wood glue to the ends, slide this up into place, and throw some brad nails or screws in from the top and the back. Now the top and back assembly are complete. So the only thing left to do is to add this bottom board. Okay, so just by looking at this, This bottom board is 7.5 inches wide by 7.5 inches deep. The bottom board is just butted up against the bottom of the backboard. By doing this, it actually leaves 3/4 of an inch of extra material sticking out, and that's where they have the pens and pencils stored. So let's talk about that little groove for the pens and pencils. And there's a ton of different ways to cut this groove in. It looks to me like it's setting back maybe 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and probably 1/4 of an inch deep. So if you have a dado blade, just set your saw up to cut that. If you don't have a dado blade, you could also do this with a regular blade and just make a couple of passes with your blade raised to 1/4 of an inch high. And again, there's tons of different ways to do this, but go ahead and do that before you attach it to the back. And then to install this, I would just install some wood glue into the back edge, put this into place, pre-drill and counterbore from the back, and install some screws. And just like any other build that we do, make sure to put your creative twist to this so that anyone that looks at this would want one for their house. Now this company is actually selling these for $32 a piece, and honestly, that's not a bad price. So for me, for my market area, I would actually try to sell it for that price and really hit hard on the fact that it is a local handmade item. And if you enjoy these types of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. This is how I know what type of content that you like and what type of content that I need to be making. And this next one made me instantly stop scrolling so I could see exactly how it was made. I saw the $70 price tag, plus the bonus that makes this the perfect build is that there are several different add-on items that you can make that are just as easy. And that's going to be this. They're calling it a single wall edge. So like I was saying, this is a part of a collection of several similar builds. So check out this picture of the entire collection and keep all of these other items in mind. In marketing, this is how you can turn one cell into 4, just like that. Okay, so this single wall edge is essentially 2x6 material and 1x6 material. And that's if you have to go buy this stuff. Honestly, you could probably dig around in your scrap pile and come up with the material that you need. So they've kind of mixed in this chunky style look into a sleek style. This entire shelf is 18 inches long. It's 5 1/4 high and 5 1/4 deep. So for these two side pieces, that's all that they've done is taken a 2x6 board, which is 5.5 inches nominal, and made 2 cuts at 5.5 inches long. And presto, they now have their 2 chunky sideboards. Now for the rest of these parts, they've used 1x6 material and everything is nested in between those 2 end boards. So with our 2 sideboards cut, let's go ahead and add our bottom board. For this, we'll be needing a 5.5 inch board that is 15 inches long. Then we'll simply install that bottom in between our 2 end boards, about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom edge. Now you can install these a couple of different ways. You can use the ends of our sideboards, or if you want to hide the joiner, you just simply use some pocket hole screws from underneath. So with our sides and our bottoms attached, let's go ahead and put in our backboard. The backboard and the front rail will also be sitting in between our 2 end boards, so both of those will need to be cut at 15-inch lengths as well. For our backboard, you'll need to rip your 1x6 down to 4 1/4 inches, and for the front rail, I just rip it down to maybe 1.5 inches or 2 inches. For the back, it will actually be sitting on top of our bottom board, and again, you can attach it through the ends or with pocket hole screws in the back. For this front rail, we'll just drop it down about 1 inch from the top, and again, just install through your sides or pocket hole screws from the inside. And that's it. You have about $5 in material wrapped up in something that they are selling for $70. And again, if you take a close look at all of the different items that they are selling in this collection, they are all super simple to make. And the crazy thing is that they are all more expensive than the one that I just broke down. They have stuck to a very modern, simplistic, clean design, and I think that they have done a great job of it. So the great thing for us with this is that we can take this clean concept, knowing that it's trending, and apply that into our versions of this. Okay, so for this next one, we have covered a ton of different styles of this, but I just wanted to quickly go over this one because it's a good idea. And that's going to be what they're calling these artfully crafted wood serving boards. Okay, so we have talked about cutting boards, serving boards, cutting trays, bread boards, cheese boards, you name it, there is a board out there for it. Again, the reason for this is because they took something that was super hot and trending that they had made a ton of money off of, which was cutting boards, and then as sales would start to drop for that, they would just evolve it into something else because there was still a demand for it. And whenever you do something like that, this is what you end up with. And this is a perfect example of the next generation of it. And honestly, the only reason they're calling this a serving board is because serving boards are in right now. You could call this a cheese board. You could call this a charcuterie board. You could call this a cutting board. You could call this a breadboard. Bottom line is it's a multi-use board. Okay, so you can look at this and pretty much tell how all of this was made, but this would be a perfect opportunity to get rid of some scraps. You could just glue up some different 3/4 inch scraps, which these are only a 1/2 inch thick and they're selling for $45 a piece. Or you can take new material and glue it up. It'd be completely up to you. But what is making these things sell is that they are different. You have these oval and these oblong shapes. So they're getting away from the sharp corners of the squares and the rectangles. Now these are actually pretty decent sizes. These oval boards, they're about 15 by 20 inches. That's all that you would have to do is to draw this out, cut it out with a jigsaw. You'd use a router or a sander to kind of clean up these edges, drill a hole in the top, and bam. You have whatever kind of board that you want to make up. Heck, sell it as a surfboard if you want. People will buy it. And these oblong boards, they would be even easier to make. You can make them out of single boards. These are 8 inches by 25 inches long. So let's say that you had an 8-foot board that was 8 inches wide. You can make these about an inch shorter, end up with 4 boards out of 1. Just take a jigsaw, cut off these sharp corners, making this nice rounded look. And then for the oblong hole that's in this, use a 1 inch or 3/4 hole saw, cut 2 different holes, connect those 2 by cutting out the centerpiece that's left with a jigsaw, clean up all of your edges with a router or a sander, and presto. You've just turned that one board into 4 $45 boards. Again, I just wanted to throw this one in there just to show you that just by changing up something very small, you can create a totally new item that could be on the next bestseller list. While we're talking about charcuterie boards and all those other types of boards that have sold like crazy just by changing up small things, check this one out. So obviously serving boards are in right now. This one's actually priced pretty decent at 20 bucks, but the crazy thing is you can actually make this for around $2.50. So right now in my area, a square edged 1x6 board is $10. This board happens to be 22 inches long by 5.5 inches wide. So if you were to use a 1x6 board, you could get 4 of these out of that. $2.50. Then what they've done to make this different is to add these scalloped edges with the option to add a letter. We've talked about these letters before. Let's get a stencil pack off of Amazon and add whatever initial that you need to. But I think that even without the initial, if you did some minor adjustments to this with maybe some underlayers, I don't think that you would have any trouble selling these things for 20 bucks a piece. So for these scalloped edges, I would just start off with a piece of cardboard that's the same dimension as this. Trace out anything that is round all around the edges, like a paint can or a tape roll. You simply lay it on top of your board, trace that out, and then cut this out with a jigsaw with a scroll blade. As far as the handle itself, since this board's 5.5 inches wide, I go ahead and make that about 2 inches wide, and it looks like it's about 6 inches long. And then that's all that they have done on the end is drilled in what looks to be maybe a 3/4 inch hole, cleaned up the sides with a sander, whitewashed this entire board, and she's ready to go. Again, I would think about shaking this up a little bit. Maybe before you whitewash it, you paint the entire thing black. Put on a couple of strips of painter's tape, maybe going long ways in the center or make a different design. Then whitewash the entire thing, pull this painter's tape back off, and it would leave you with a totally different look, and then get rid of the need to customize this thing. Regardless of how you do it, or if you decide to make this thing, as you can see, it is super easy to make. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video and that you were able to take something away from it. But the most important thing that I hope that you took away from this is the realization just by using a bit of creativity, thinking divergently, putting your own twist to items, you can make something that is entirely different and unique. You already have it. It's all up here. It's just allowing yourself to look at things in a different way. So give it a try, even if it's none of these. And of course, the hardest step of doing anything like this is the first one. So believe in yourself regardless of what anyone else thinks. And get up, get out, and get your make on. We'll see ya. Imagine taking a pile of wood and turning it into something amazing. Now, imagine doing that without years of frustration. You do not need a fancy workshop, expensive tools, or years of experience. With Woodworking Kickstart, you'll build confidence and real skills in no time. So you can spend years making mistakes and learning the hard way like I did, or you can start building with confidence today. So join me in Woodworking Kickstart and let's get your journey started.